Hey everybody, I'm Elliot. Welcome back to another episode of me trying to read a book in every subgenre of every genre. I really need a better title for this project, but until then. So, if this is your first time watching this series, I am starting with the fantasy genre, and today I am reading a book in the high fantasy category. The book representing that is Throne of Glass by Sarah J. Maas. Maas. I think it's pronounced Maas. This is clearly a young adult's book. I don't know. I would be a bit embarrassed if I was reading this on the SkyTrain or on the bus, or someone sees me reading this. I should be comfortable reading, right? Why am I even talking about this? Let's talk about high fantasy. So what is high fantasy? So there are a lot of different broad definitions of high fantasy, but I want to highlight a few common traits. I guess while reading, identify those elements in the story to accurately confirm that what I have just read is high fantasy. So one is that it has to take place in another world, like Middle Earth or Westeros. It can't take place outside here. If it did, it wouldn't be high fantasy. Another element is that it's usually good versus evil type of theme going on. The last thing I want to mention is that usually in high fantasy there are different races of character, not just like different human races, but like species of people like dwarves, elves, wizards. So I'll be looking for those three elements of high fantasy in this book. Commonly, high fantasy books tend to be a part of a larger series, which this one is. This is actually Sarah J. Maas's first book she published, and since then she's published 8 in this. It's not called Throne of Glass series, but yeah, it's part of this world she's built. That's everything I want to say to, introduce this book, I guess. And so I'm gonna start reading it. I'll check in with you around the midway point to see how I feel, if all the high fantasy elements are there. Doesn't really matter. And we'll get right to it. Alright, check back with you in a bit. Hey everybody, I'm back. Still reading Thrones of Glass. My dog Michael is right here. Can't get him out of the foreground, but that's alright. We'll just have to deal. So what are my impressions of the book so far? I'm about halfway through right now, and I'm just gonna come on and say it. There's a lot of sexual tension in this book. It's very clearly a young adult's book, and sexual tension is definitely there. I'm not quite sure how old the characters are. I think that's what's confusing me. I'm guessing they're like teenage, maybe a bit older, maybe in their 20s. The thing is, some of them are royalty too, and she's like an assassin. I think her name is Kalina? Yeah. You have this assassin character who also has like hots for other characters in the story. Yeah. Anyways, that's just an observation I have with the book so far. It's not subtle, is what I'm saying. It's not subtle. So let's talk about the fantasy aspect, high fantasy. So one interesting technique that this book does that I think it's really well done is that it opened the story with the character traveling across the world. I think that's a very interesting technique to describe the surrounding, describe the political climate and the actual climate of the world. There is a map, like all good high fantasy stories. There is a map of the world right here. You can look at it too. All right. So that is I think a fun way to begin a story is just having the character travel from one part to another. As for my current enjoyment of the book, I could really feel that it wasn't made for someone like me. It really isn't. It's like, you could tell just by the way it's marketed It's, I don't, you don't know much about me, but this is not my flavor. And the whole point of this experience is for me to read new books, so I'm not gonna discriminate. I'm not gonna judge a book by its cover. It does remind me a lot of Hunger Games, which is a book I read and I actually really enjoyed it. This is Throne of Glass, to me, not as creative as the Hunger Games. Hunger Games has a lot more, I think it's more compact than this one. This one seems to be a little all over the place at the moment. In terms of the story, it is pretty interesting. It's about this assassin, Kalina. She was captured and enslaved for a while, but then chosen by the prince of this country to be his representative in this competition, to be the king's champion or something like that. And she has to go against all these like brutes and criminals, and yeah, empowering feminist book, I think. I don't know what empowers people. In terms of it being a fantasy, which is kind of what I'm judging this book on, there isn't a whole lot. Aside from it being set in another world, there isn't a whole lot of magic, there isn't a lot of characters who are of a different race, like elves or dwarves. There isn't any unique creatures. And honestly, remember me saying that there's usually a battle between good and evil. The good and evil is not totally clear at the moment. I mean, she's an assassin, and I get it, the rulers are often really evil, but they haven't really done anything evil yet. Closest thing to magic so far is nearing the middle part of the story. She has this dreamlike, Kalina, she has this dreamlike moment where she walks through this tunnel and finds a sarcophagus and sees vision, a ghost of the past queen. I am gonna continue working my way through this book. This is a good checkup with you guys on how I feel about it so far. It is a much longer book than I anticipated. It's like 400 pages. So I'm gonna keep doing that for a bit. All right, I'll talk to you guys later. Check back in soon. Hey, so I've just finished reading Throne of Glass by Sarah J. Maas, and here are my thoughts about it. You know what? I remember earlier I said that I was not really feeling this book. I was kind of just trying to get through it. But this book is a lot like, you know how you sometimes meet someone and you don't really like them, and then you go through some shit together, and then all of a sudden you have that shared experience and now you're best friends. This is kind of how I feel about this book. I ended up really liking it. I ended up feeling like I wanted to read the next one, which is kind of surprising because, like I said, this book was really not written for me, at least me, my demographic of people. So the fact that I'm saying that, it's something very interesting about this book, or this book does a really good job at following that cliffhanger formula that the page turning formula, and it actually does a really good job. It ended up being very enticing, and definitely the second part of this book is much more interesting than the first. All right, now let's talk about the fantasy elements of it. So like I mentioned earlier, there isn't a whole lot of fantasy. There isn't a whole lot of characters of different races, like elves, dwarves, etc. There is a reason for that. The reason is because magic is outlawed in this setting, this place. The king has outlawed it. However, few of the characters were able to find loopholes to get around that. It gets pretty complicated and kind of confusing, but I feel like a lot of those elements will be explained in further reading, and it's just enough to like, okay, I think I kind of understand. There's this creature that shows up, the Ritterak, which sounds like it's like a spider-like creature with like backward legs and a lot of jagged teeth. That sounded like a scary creature. I really enjoyed certain elements of this book. I didn't love it overall. it does feel like I have a certain respect for it after finishing it. An interesting thing that it was able to do to show the history of this world was through the character reading books, being curious about books. And one line that I found pretty good was that this character is an assassin, however she loves music. So the idea is that as an artist you get to create stuff, as an assassin you get to destroy stuff. So you find a balance in life, you get to do a little bit of both, and I really enjoyed that part. As for comparing it to all the rest of the books that I've read so far, this will be nearer to the bottom for me, unfortunately, although it did really good at redeeming itself, and I do recommend this. If you are a young adults fan, I think this is a really, really good book. I mean, as someone who's clearly not a young adult anymore, I enjoyed it. It's not a complicated read. It's not Game of Thrones. Once again, I'm reading a book from every subgenre of every genre. And if you're interested in following along, please subscribe. I'll probably have a new book discussion like this once a month. Once a month for you. All right, I'll see you soon. Bye.